Career Insights. We're honored that you chose to spend the next hour learning what it takes to succeed here as a transportation consultant at Fehr Peers. My name is Cassandra Allen, and I'm a part of the Fehr Peers Human Resources team. Before we get started, let's cover a few housekeeping items. During the panel discussion today, you can ask questions at any time via the questions chat pod located in your webinar control panel. If you're unable to see the full display of webinar controls, locate the minimized control panel near the top of your screen and click on the orange arrow button to expand your view. We anticipate receiving many questions during the webinar, and we will do our best to address the questions as they come in. If we're unable to get to your question live, we'll provide you with a response by email within 1 week of this webinar. And now I'll turn it over to our host, Fehr Peers CEO, Matt Henry.
Thanks, Cassandra. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. Here is our second webinar. We did one of these back in, was it October that we did our first one, our Unfiltered Career Website, Career Insights webinar, and that one was more oriented to what it's like in the industry and more of a broad view of the transportation industry and some tips. Hopefully you got some good perspectives on advice from us in terms of who does well and how to get into this industry more generally. And the recording of that webinar is up on our website. If you haven't had a chance to catch that, we encourage you to check that out. This one is really more about Fehr Peers and specifically what it is that we're looking for in terms of new hires, new graduates, and we realize that this is all about fit. This is really a function of not every place is a great place to work for every employee, and not every employee is a great fit to every company. And we totally get that. And we're all about trying to find the right fit for individuals and for the company. And so we thought this would be a good way to at least put some information out there in advance of recruiting season for us, which is starting to ramp up here right now after the holidays. As we get toward the spring, it's usually heavy recruiting time for us. So we've got 3 panel members here today, and you're going to hear from them in just a few minutes. We've got some questions and things we'll get started on, opportunities for you to, as Cassandra mentioned, to jump in on the chat along the way here, and looking forward to the next hour here. So I'm going to ask each of our 3 panel members here to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. So Ann, why don't we start with you?
Great, thanks, Matt. I'm Ann Bowers, and I am in the Denver office of Fehr Peers. Operations manager, have been working for over 20 years and in both public and private sectors. So maybe I can answer some of those questions.
Great. Michael.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Kennedy. I'm in our Los Angeles office. I'm the operations manager here, and I've been with Fehr Peers about 10 years. I'm a transportation planner by background.
Thanks, Mike. Megan.
Hi everybody, my name is Megan Mittman. I'm the operations manager in Walnut Creek in the San Francisco Bay Area, and also coming up on my 10-year anniversary with Fehr Peers, and I do mostly pedestrian and bicycle planning as my focus area.
Great, thanks. So the voice you hear in the background there is Cassandra Patterson. Cassandra is our HR talent management specialist, and so she's one that's reviewing a lot of the resumes that's coming in the door, and can jump in here even though you're not on camera here today. There's only 4 headshots here we can fit on the screen. So you'll hear this voice back there. That's Cassandra from HR as well. So, and so you've got Cassandra, you've got Megan, Michael, and Ann, all 3 of whom are hiring managers. Essentially, these are the folks making the decisions. It's not Cassandra or me or anybody else on the corporate side making hiring decisions. It's the folks that are running our offices and other leadership in those offices. So that's what we wanted to have. These 3 folks. In fact, just as background, both Megan and Michael started with the firm right out of college, at least right out of transportation study in their universities, and it's been with some other firms as well. So they've all been where you are, and particularly in Megan and Michael's case, been with where you are in terms of if you feel like Fehr Peers is a good fit for you. So let's jump in here and get started. We did get a couple questions ahead of time from folks, but we've got some bigger picture things that we'll start with, and then we'll come around to those questions as well. So let me get started. Megan, I'll start with you. We thought a good launching point here would be sort of what's our typical candidate profile that seems to fit well and work well, knowing that everybody's a little bit different. But give us a general sense of that's sort of our general candidate, and then maybe we'll come back and talk about some of the out-of-the-box profile candidates that we've seen work well as well. But let's start with the typical.
I think we use the phrase a lot. We like to hire engineers who can think like planners and planners who can think like engineers. And your entry-level position is an engineer/planner position, and you're doing a little bit of everything intentionally. And so we need people who can write, we need people who can do Excel, and we need people who can bring a consulting perspective to the wide range of different project types that you're going to be on, kind of whether or not you studied a certain aspect of that in college.
Yeah. Yeah, good. What's your thought on that subject, Michael?
You know, we're a people business. We're a consulting firm. We work for clients, and so communication abilities, be it verbal, written, as Megan said, visual, are all critically important. So whether or not you come from a more or less technical background, we really need people that are strong communicators, while at the same time being able to think analytically and use analytical tools. So capacity to learn technical things, but most importantly, the ability to communicate those technical things and the results to others.
Yeah, good point. And what would you add to that point?
I would just echo exactly what Megan and Michael said, but also add not just the ability to do all those, but the eagerness and willingness to do all those things. Be excited about all the different aspects of transportation planning and engineering that we do here at Fehr Peers, and be willing to take on any type of project.
Yeah. As you think about other firms who do what we do, and the firms that we team with, partner with sometimes, or compete with out there in this realm of the business, Fehr Peers is clearly more in that, just as you're saying, more in the heavily analytical, but also very, very much upfront consulting, very local, community-based work with our clients as well. Some firms lean a little bit more heavily on the analytical side, would you say, and a little less on the community consulting piece. Some are very heavily on the consulting side and maybe are a little less analytically modeling and analysis oriented. So we find it difficult to find this mix that we're talking about? Megan, you say you want the plan engineer, you know, the combination. These are hard to find, and what are the some examples or some combinations that you've seen well, maybe in some of this outside the box profile idea?
Yeah, I mean, so there's the kind of direct way, which is people who have dual degrees. So that's, you know, and we certainly hire a lot of people that come with that background. But otherwise, you know, looking at someone who's coming out of a civil engineering program but has gone out of their way to take a few classes in planning or policy or business, and likewise somebody who has maybe more of an urban studies background but has shown that they're, you know, learning some computer programming and some pretty analytical GIS. So just ways to kind of show us through the coursework and maybe the internship decisions that they've made that they have a broad range of skills.
Yeah. Yeah. Michael, do we have anybody in Los Angeles that's got sort of a liberal arts or you yourself actually have somewhat of a unique background, so maybe we could start with you and then talk about others in the office there.
Yeah, I thought this question might be tailor-made for me. Undergraduate music degree.
Music.
I am not alone in the Los Angeles office. There's another staff person who is also an undergraduate music major, and we both went to grad school for planning and found transportation. So, two music majors, and I don't know what that means, but people can decide on.
You're good at karaoke. The company retreats. That's what that is.
So yeah, I think we try and find people that convey the best sets of skills, and you know, certainly look for planning or engineering in their graduate degree, but not exclusively geography. You know, other areas come to mind, but it's more about the skills you bring than the educational background that you come from. And people that have worked previously, so in between undergrad and grad school, I worked for eight or 9 years, and even though that business was completely not relevant to Fehr Peers from, you know, a technical standpoint or otherwise, just having lived and interacted with people in a professional environment, you grow and you learn how to communicate, and that's people that have done that in between undergraduate and graduate are certainly candidates that I look for.
Mm-hmm. And do we have any folks with that kind of background in Denver, or not at the moment?
No, not at the moment, but you know, it's not that we don't look at that. I mean, you know, I think the last webinar hit on a very good point in that what you learn in your classroom isn't necessarily everything you need when you come to work here. You mostly learn it on the job. So
Right.
I think we are willing to look for any background. What I like to look for are, critical thinkers, people who are problem solvers, and that doesn't mean that you have to have an engineering or a planning degree.
Right, exactly. So and obviously you come from a background that's different, and I'm sure you had to deal with this, Michael, when you were interviewing you initially, sort of convince us essentially that you really want to do transportation, right? Because when people come to work here, we're making a big investment, and it's hard because people don't know what they want to do all the time, and they come in and they think, hey, I want to do transportation. So how do we sort through determining that and understanding the difference between somebody who says, I'd like to try it out versus, no, this is really what I want to do? Megan, what's your thought on that?
I think we look at where you've done internships. So, maybe you're at a school that there's not a transportation class you can take, right? So that's not necessarily a fair filter. But have you gone out of your way to find internships, or even just asking stories like, where does your transportation enthusiasm come from? Did you grow up looking at maps and being excited when you go to a city, on vacation to ride the subway system, or things that just kind of show you're a little bit of a transportation geek? Because that's something that we kind of all have in common, and that makes it really fun to be around our colleagues because we all share that kind of common enthusiasm for this.
Yeah. What do you think, Michael? How did you get to the point? You said you worked 8 or 9 years. That's a pretty good gap there. How did you get to that point where you said, this is what I want to do, and did you figure it out in grad school, or did you decide and then go to grad school or internships, or what was that like for you?
So in terms of urban planning and what I wanted to focus on and finding transportation, it was a process through grad school. I've always been fascinated by cities. I grew up in the Boston area, half a block from the T, so transportation is kind of in my collective conscious, just hearing it in the middle of the night. And as I wanted to find a different career, I was just fascinated by cities and fascinated by Los Angeles, and transportation is such the crux of the issue and the beauty and the everything that is Los Angeles from A to Z, good and bad. And so it just sort of organically led that way, and I had a couple of really great classes at I went to Cal Poly Pomona for my master's and learned about direct ridership forecasting and some direct quantitative type skill sets, and really like the balance of sort of policy and analysis that I found in transportation, and ultimately that led me to Fehr Peers. And so I think I brought a lifelong enthusiasm that I didn't maybe quite realize I had, and over time sort of discovering transportation industry and consulting that came to bear, and I think I was able to communicate that sufficiently in my interview to help overcome some of the challenges of like, hey, what have you been doing for 8 years, and why are you applying to us?
Yeah, good. I think there's increasing number of people out there that are like that. I think that's a great story. And you said critical thinking is something that one of the many things you're really looking at when you're interviewing. So how do you discern in our interview process? What are you looking at? Is it the cover letter, the resume? Is it in the discussion throughout the interview? How are you determining that piece and the other pieces you're looking for?
Well, I think it's in the questions and answers that we ask people. So if people don't know, part of the process here is you're asked to answer a set of questions, and to me it's how they talk about their life experiences and the thought that they've put into how they chose their graduate degree or how they chose their internship, as Megan said. It's to me, it comes across more in the interview process, and when you're talking to somebody one-on-one, it's hard to get that off of a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
But the steps that they've taken and the choices that they've made.
Yeah. So let's talk about the internship process a little bit, because that is very important to us. It's important to a lot of firms out there. We do a lot of our hiring from interns, but not exclusively, right? So Megan, what's your experience in terms of? You said we're looking for internships. It's pretty rare that we would hire somebody a graduate with no internship experience, correct?
Definitely, right?
Yeah.
Even the undergrads that we hire, we expect that they've done something, between junior and senior year, to have some type of work experience.
Right.
I think in terms of how we think of our internships as part of it, I consider it an extended interview process too, right? So one of the things that I will screen out is an intern that there's no way that they would ever land here full time, right? So it's not that we're only looking to hire for people that have been interns previously, but that's an ideal situation for us, is that the internship goes really well and then it's able to convert into a full-time hire. So that's kind of one of the criteria that I look at.
Yeah. And you mentioned you work public-private. I mean, do you also look at internships public-private as well, or does it help if their internship is more at a consulting firm or a varied background, or does it really matter?
I don't think it really matters, especially for entry level. I think you get that exposure to the transportation field, whether it's public or private. They're different exposures, but I think that early in your career, I don't think it matters.
Okay. All right. So we have a question.
We do have a question
in the chat. Well, let's hear it from Cassandra.
Miriam Pinsky asks, what kind of skill sets do you look for in candidates? What kinds of classes do you recommend that students take?
Okay, let's take those one at a time. So we talked about a few of the skills thus far, but maybe, Michael, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on some of the skills that are top of mind for you, skill set-wise, and then we'll come back and talk about classes and stuff.
Well, briefly from a technical standpoint, I'd like everybody to have taken a GIS course at a minimum, and in that or in another course have done data analysis work with Excel. Those are really foundational skill sets for us in our office. And then, from there, more broadly, exposure to transportation history and policy and kind of understanding the, how things work at the federal and the state level, at least have some basic context for that. And then, like I said earlier, it's a people business, so you don't necessarily take a class to be a great connector with people, but, if you've shown initiative to be a part of clubs or, other organizations on campus where you're interacting with and working as a team with others, that's really important too.
Yeah. Megan, I thought you want to add on that subject? Skills. We're talking about skills now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the leadership skills, public speaking skills, giving presentations. So we're kind of testing to see what you'll ultimately be like, 3 to 5 years in, when it's time for you to go work with your client for the first time or be managing projects. So when given opportunities in group projects and studios, what role did you take? Was it a leadership role? When joining a club, were you just kind of a member of it, or did you ultimately take on some type of a leadership opportunity? That shows us that you might take that type of role in the office as well.
Right, and it doesn't have to necessarily be I've been the president of everything, and I solved world hunger and saved babies from a burning building along the way either, right? I mean, it's some initiative beyond just participating. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and risk taking too. So we're very entrepreneurial here, and so where you were able to creatively find an opportunity or start something new, I think we find that just as valuable as kind of I was the president of the ITE chapter or something like that.
I want to come back and talk about risk in a second for sure, but let's also talk about, the other question was courses. Mm-hmm. Are there any that you can point to where you feel like, Michael, you mentioned more skill set GIS probably coming from a course. I hear AutoCAD a lot from some of our managers as well. And are there courses, planning side, engineering side, or policy side that you would feel like that's really helpful for us? I know every university is a little different, so that's a little hard, but
it is. I don't have anything in particular. As Michael said, the GIS is important, and it's becoming more important every day. Having an understanding, the policy is important. We work a lot with jurisdictions, and I think understanding the policies, I would say, Matt, no, not anything particular.
Yeah. Michael, anything in particular there? You mentioned a few things in your skill discussion, but...
Yeah. I think beyond that, I mean, if somebody is in a program where there's the opportunity to learn a little bit about transportation analysis, I know some of the universities here have a course where you learn the basics of synchro and get a little bit of exposure to intersection analysis. That's really great if that's available to you, but certainly not the end of the world if it's not in your program.
Yeah. Megan, are we seeing, when you're looking at resumes, are you seeing, you say we're looking for planning that with some analytical skills, or we're looking for analysts that can also communicate and think policy. Are you seeing more of one or the other in a lot of the resumes? It feels to me like we get a lot of people who have a passion about transportation and are very interested in it, but maybe don't have quite the analytical background that we're talking about is necessary for us.
I think that's a tougher one for us, right? I think when we see somebody coming in with an engineering background, we can kind of take that directly as, well, they're going to be able to probably handle the analytics, and so then we'll dig more on the softer side and the writing side. I think when they come in without that, then we have to really be convinced a little bit more that and internships can help with that too. Somebody who's done a pretty technical internship. It can help us feel confident that they've been able to do that. I'll always ask the "What's your favorite function in Excel?" question, and that tells me when you answer, "I like to be able to create a graph." That's not the same as I like pivot tables or things like that.
Nice. Be ready for that question, everybody.
There you go.
What's your favorite Excel function? That's a good one. That's good. Let's see. We've got a few more coming in the chat as well. I want to also. We had a question from Tara, a couple questions from Tara ahead of time as well. So let's talk about those for a second. Can you provide a few examples of specific project types or tasks an entry-level planner engineer may encounter in their first year in their role within project teams? So can you maybe, Anne, can you give us an example or two that would be good to answer Tara's question?
Sure. So I think, when you first start out, you could be exposed to a variety of projects. So they could be land use and transportation tied. So we do transportation impact analysis, where you're looking at the potential impacts of a proposed development on the roadway and intersection network. We do long-range planning for jurisdictions, so transportation master plans. You could be gathering data, you could be writing up an existing conditions analysis, you could be doing some synchro intersection analysis to determine level of service. You could go out and do travel time runs, and it could be it's a variety of things, and I think that's one of the things, I think the difference between the public and private, and if we get into that, you're exposed to a variety of projects very quickly.
Right.
And you could be working on a variety within one day, a week, a month. So.
Right. Wide range for sure, especially early on. Michael, we're doing a lot of transit work in Los Angeles, so maybe talk a little bit about some of the transit type projects, active transportation projects we're doing as well.
Sure. Yeah, we work frequently with Metro down here in LA, that's the transit agency, and they're doing a lot of planning work as well as operating the transit system. And so it ranges from things like station design, building a new transit facility, how do you want to design your station so pedestrians and bicycles and buses can get in and out effectively, to more countywide planning of looking at conditions at every single one of the thousands of bus stations in Los Angeles County. Using GIS, how can you make conclusions about how pedestrian and bicycle access can be improved? So from a micro to a macro scale, you could work in a given day for one client. And so we really do try to provide as much range in the types of things that an entry-level person will work on, like Ann said. So certainly active transportation, transit, transportation impact studies, because ultimately we feel like as people specialize, having had that foundational experience in the broad range of what transportation means, will make you a better bike planner, will make you a better transit planner, will make you a better traffic engineer if you understand active transportation issues. So that's what we really focus on in the early years.
Good. Yeah. So we've got we're doing good on time. We have several questions. It sounds like coming in the chat. So we're gonna try to move a little faster, a little more breadth and so we can cover as many of these topics as we can. So go ahead and hit us with the next one.
I'm noticing that a couple people are asking similar questions, so I'm going to summarize here. We have a couple of questions related to transitioning from a non-related background into transportation, and if they were planning to do that, what's the best approach to doing that? If they've maybe studied similarly to Michael's experience, kind of studying something that's non-related, but then found an interest or led themselves or found a path into transportation, how do they cross that bridge to get over to where we are?
In terms of getting the job, does it sound like that's the question?
It does.
Okay. Michael, how much, what was your approach to both preparing to come to a job like this, moving out of another industry, as well as, what was your pitch coming in the door?
Well, I used my graduate program to really work through that transition, and so my pitch was really the skills that I had developed and the connections that I had made through grad school. So if the question is coming from somebody who's pretty much done with school and they're looking to build these skills, say they've got a master's degree in English literature or whatever, I think that's going to be harder. So you may need to look for internship opportunities as broadly as possible. And there are some programs out there, like, for example, here Metro that I was speaking about earlier, they have a trainee program where recent graduates from undergraduate, whether or not they're in transportation planning or engineering, can work at the agency, get exposed to what they do. So you'd have to look more broadly. But if you are in school and you're, say, coming from a liberal arts degree and are studying urban planning, try and take all the transportation courses you can find, try and get exposed as much as possible to anything analytical, nerd out on transportation blogs and learn as much as you can, and then go out and meet people like me or other people that work for our firm or others that you think does good work, and connect with them at a ITE event or American Planning Association event and show them that you're interested in an engaging person, and that's the way you get your foot in the door.
Yeah, great. Yeah, good question. Okay,
Another candidate asked if we have a preference between planners versus engineers, and kind of tagging on to that, from another attendee asking, how do we value government agency experience versus private consulting experience?
Well, I can answer the first one. The answer is no. We don't have a preference one or the other, right? I mean, it's very candidate specific, and we're looking for a combination of skills and experiences that doesn't really matter. You can have a music background, as Michael said. Don't we have somebody with a theater background too? Isn't Jeff?
Yeah. One of our most highly technical person in our office has an undergraduate degree in theater.
Musics and a theater in the same office. I love that. Okay, so there you go. That's a pretty good example right there of it. Second part of the question, please say.
Government agency experience versus private consulting experience, and how do you value one over the other, or do you?
In terms of presumably internships, I would guess. And you were saying earlier, it doesn't quite matter to you necessarily, but you look at that differently, or?
Well, I looked to see exactly what they did in those internships.
Right. So it's less about where they worked; it's more about what they did.
Exactly.
All right.
Let's see. We also have a question from Ryan Reeves about what support in terms of time or resources do you provide to staff to get more involved in conferences or industry organizations as they come on board?
Conferences, industry organizations. Megan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of support for it. I think that we use, it's called the 50-50 approach to a lot of things here, and that's there needs to be kind of your own skin in the game too, and so we cover like half of your time while you're there. We also have kind of some pretty clear guidelines around that you don't just get to go and watch and be kind of somebody in the audience, but in particular if you're going to be traveling and it's not just kind of at the conference in your local city, there needs to be a role that you have on a committee or a presentation that you're giving, or you're interacting in some recruiting efforts or something there. So we also encourage good interaction on social media while you're there, and of course coming back to your office and sharing what you learn. But to the extent you line all of those up and can show the business case and the value. We had, as you know, Ryan, a lot of people at TRB, and it's good to see you there.
Yeah, and we have obviously a lot of the staff in Denver are involved in all sorts of things there in the community. So how do you help them get plugged in to engage at the level Megan's talking about? That we want people to be actively engaged if they're going to be involved in a professional organization, in a company, going to a conference. So of course, when you're coming out of college, unless you have some background like what Michael was talking about, maybe a little hard to get plugged in. How do we help people do that?
Well, I think it's just the initial introduction. So we, the group here, we're involved in ULI, APA, ITE, APBP. We involved in a lot of different things and basically bring the people with us. We see what their interest is, bring them to an event, introduce them, and it's not just that they belong, but we also look towards being on a committee and having a role in that organization, not just going to the lunches and the speaker and the talks that they give, but actually taking an active role in the organization.
Right.
But it's the introductions, it's networking.
Sure. And Michael, the idea of helping people engage, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on why we're kind of insistent upon that level of engagement versus the passive I just want to go and sort of listen approach sometimes that people need a little bit of encouragement to jump in. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Well, look, we're hired by our clients for our ideas and our customer service and our ability to help them deliver. And we don't deliver by sitting passively back and just executing something basic and simple. They expect a lot of us, and so we have to put a lot of initiative and heart in our work, and so we expect our staff to do that in whatever they're involved in. And so, you're not going to sit in the corner and check your phone and sit in a conference for 5 days. We expect that you're going to learn a lot, share with others most importantly, and so disseminate the information as broadly as possible. And so you've got to, your time is precious in life, but also in consulting, it needs to go to a budget or a certain amount of overhead that's limited. So you need to take very good use of that time.
Megan, could you talk for a second about this? What we developed a few years ago was this idea of a career development budget, and helping people understand and manage that time and identify an amount of time that is oriented toward projects and learning on the job, versus the time that would go more toward overhead, like what Michael was talking about, whether it be conferences or training courses, the many that we do, or lots of other ways people can invest in their career in that way. Can you talk briefly about that?
Yeah, I think it's been helpful. So one of the things, if you're not familiar with consulting, a metric we use all the time is chargeability, right? So it's the percentage of our time that's covered on projects. And I think that a lot of newer staff to consulting and to Fehr Peers, that's kind of this mystery number, and how does that come about? And sitting down with people and saying it's just math. We can figure out there's 2,080 hours in the year, and this is how we break down what percentage that is. And so being able to have a transparent process to say, of those hours, this is the share that needs to go on projects, and then there's this whole bucket that's available to you that's kind of our investment in you for career development, and there's some autonomy and some flexibility for how people want to use that. And I think it's also kind of pretty cool to see just how big that bucket is. I mean, there's a lot of hours that are set aside, and then also an expectation for hours that you'll set aside yourself to be able to be investing in yourself too.
Back to the 50-50 concept that you mentioned earlier. Okay, lots more questions coming in, so let's keep that moving. Go ahead, Cassandra.
So another couple of folks have asked about the importance of a grad degree versus a PhD versus undergrad. Kind of, what's our take on the different levels of education in terms of the candidates we consider?
Good question. Thoughts on PhD, grad school versus undergrad?
I'm going to be honest and say not interested in PhD.
We don't have too many of those. We have a couple, right? We have, say, three or four maybe in the firm, but not too many.
Mm-hmm. Right, but I think of like Jennifer. I mean, it's in statistics or math,
That's it, yeah.
So that's not necessary. It's not something that I look for. I think a master's degree, especially if your undergrad is not in the field,
Sure.
a master's degree is important. If you have an undergrad in civil engineering or urban planning, not as important, but understand that you may be going up against folks who do have a master's.
Right. Yeah. Are we hiring anybody that doesn't have a master's in LA, Michael?
Actually, I just hired somebody who started this week, but typically everybody a master's degree. I actually just hired another PhD, but we're probably 90% master's degree.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Megan? We have one I know a PhD in
One PhD here, so that we had two candidates or two new hires, one last week and one this week. The one last week is our full-time, and he's right out of undergrad, but civil. I'd say that tends to be more if they're not masters, they have a civil undergrad, and if they're more planning or a dual degree, then they've gone through the master's program. And I particularly like to see a gap in between. I think that it shows some real creative thought and intention on your career when you have worked for a couple of years and then you decide to go back to grad school, because that's a pretty deliberate decision.
It doesn't have to be 8 years like Michael's, right? That was.
Feel free to find your path sooner than I found.
Exactly. All right.
We had someone ask if we require an EIT, and I can answer that briefly,
Okay.
that we do not require an EIT. I think if you're coming in as a civil engineering student, it certainly is helpful to have an EIT, but it's not a requirement.
Not a requirement, but certainly going to be necessary to get licensed at some point. And I can tell you from personal experience, get it as close to your undergrad degree as possible, because every day that goes by after you finish undergrad, it gets harder and harder to remember all that stuff that you learned and to pass that fundamental engineering exam. So go ahead.
Great question from Maggie Dong. How would entrepreneurial spirit play a role in an employee's career development process inside of Fehr Peers?
Entrepreneurial spirit. Michael, start us off on entrepreneurial spirit. How important is that?
It's super important, and people that are able to demonstrate that earlier in their career are people that really grow quickly and move forward here. One of my colleagues in our office, her name is Fatima. She comes from she actually has a PhD. She comes from a background in freight planning academically, something that we hadn't done much of as a firm, and through her interest, sheer will, and support from a couple company-wide leaders, we're now doing several studies, and it's kind of the perfect example of her personal passion, frankly, but something that's aligning with business purpose and strategy and just taking off and finding great success. So people that are really excited and passionate about something, even if it's something that we're not doing, are ideal candidates for us.
Scale of 1 to 10, and entrepreneurial spirit is a
9.
9.5, 3/4. Yeah, pretty darn important. Same, Megan. And no one's going to come in an interview and say, no, I'm not entrepreneurial, right? I mean, everyone's going to say, yes, I'm very entrepreneurial. But as I think a key is you have talked about earlier, we need to see it. We need to see it in your resume. We need to see it in your experience, and be able to show us that it's more than just sort of an interest that you have. It's something you actually that is part of who you are, not so much something you'd like to be going forward.
I've got a couple questions from attendees about our preference to local versus out-of-state or out-of-the-area candidates, both for internships as well as entry-level positions.
Yeah, so, and I know we've hired some local folks in Denver. We've also moved, I remember Carly, she moved right in from UNC, right?
Right.
Didn't know a soul in Denver, I believe.
Right. Yeah, the location, not so important. Our local folks, all our interns are local, but yeah, most of the folks, and I think I shared with you, in fact, everybody in the Denver office, nobody got their undergrad degree in a Colorado school. So mostly transplants. So not a barrier at all.
We've hired a lot of local folks in LA, though, right, Michael? There's a lot of you break up a lot of little scrapes in the office there between the USC and the UCLA folks.
Yeah,
all the time.
A little bit. Seems like UCLA is a little bit better represented in the office. I won't comment on why. but it just is what it is.
Basketball team's better this year, but not the football team. So.
I would say that I actually really like both having a lot of local people here, people that have grown up in LA or gone to school in LA because they understand the city, and I also really like people that have lived elsewhere, gone to school elsewhere, and can bring a different geographic perspective. So getting to what some of the things we said earlier, we really appreciate diversity of background and diversity in our team because we ultimately feel like that makes us better at our job.
Now, Megan, obviously you ran our San Francisco office for several years, and now you run our East Bay office here in Walnut Creek. Are you finding it more difficult to get folks from other parts of the country to want to live in the East Bay versus to want to be based in San Francisco?
Yes, although I think that, you know, even in my intro I said I'm from the Walnut Creek office, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think for people who didn't grow up here or haven't lived here, people just don't necessarily know where Walnut Creek is, and in particular don't know that you can live in Oakland, if not San Francisco, and commute here and actually commute in a reverse direction and get a seat on BART. So once we kind of have an opportunity to introduce what Walnut Creek is, and we're getting a transit village, it's going to be cool here. You know, I think that can change it sometimes too.
There are seats on BART. You can't tell in the peak direction.
And the trains don't actually move, but you're at least sitting when you're stuck.
That's true. So we're recruiting. I mean, I've been here almost 25 years now. We're recruiting from more places in the country than ever before, and so I think it's something that we're very open to, and we embrace that diversity. What else do we have in the chat box?
So also someone wondering kind of how work and life are balanced as an entry-level employee coming in, and I think that was one of the topics that we were thinking of talking about.
Yes.
So kind of some of the top stressors and how, like, what is it like as you get adjusted? Absolutely.
Megan, I know this is a passion area of yours. Talk about WorkLife Fit, as we call it.
Yeah, and that the use of the word fit is pretty intentional for us on that, because I think it's, you know, how does your personal life fit into your work, and how does your work fit into your personal life? And that's really different for a lot of people, right? So, and I think we're really flexible in terms of appreciating that. So for some people, that means it's compartmentalized, and they have their time at work and their time at home, and we collaborate with them to kind of figure out how to make that work effectively. And for other people, they like to mix it and match it a little bit more, and there's a lot of opportunities with all of us having laptops and good, you know, remote access to everything to be able to do it that way. But I think there's also kind of thinking about it through different phases of your career, that maybe early on, your first few years, you're a little bit more focused on work, and then a few years in, you need to be a little bit less focused on work. And so that mix changes over time, and I think we're just really open and collaborative, and we'll connect you with someone who's been in your similar situation at some point in their career to help you think about strategies and dispel some of the myths that you might think, you know, oh, I couldn't possibly ask for that flexibility or for that option. Chances are you can, and that there's a story of somebody who's done it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, Michael, the IT investment that we're making, and some of the other things like maybe the mentoring program as well that you and I participated in a few years ago as part of that work-life balance, work-life fit?
Sure. Well, on the IT side, I mean, all of us pretty much have laptops unless we need them for heavy-duty computing for modeling or GIS. And so the technical infrastructure is there to support flexibility, whether you work in the LA office, but you need to go into the East Bay to visit family, and so you work out of the Walnut Creek office, and it's pretty seamless. And then, so the tangible tech things are there. On the support side, that's really, for me, one of the hallmark things about working here that's been incredibly impactful for my career. So I think now maybe 4 years ago, I applied to our mentorship program, and I chose Matt Henry. He's done pretty well. He's figured some things out that I could learn a few things from our CEO, and the fact that I could mentor with our CEO is pretty special. I would wager to say there are many places where that's not possible. And so, it's a year-long, pretty intensive mentorship opportunity, but it's self-driven, and I think that's a real important hallmark about how we approach support here at Fehr Peers. So it doesn't magically appear in your office that you get the support that you need. You need to decide what you need, and you need to ask for it. Whether it's, hey, I need to come in a little bit later 3 days a week because I have this going on, or I want to work a condensed schedule. Can I work, 9 hours a day and do every other Friday off, or can you buy me a hotspot so that I can work on the train, or hey, I'm really struggling with this one thing. I really think that like if I paired up with Anne in Denver, she'd be a great mentor for me. Well, usually the answer is yes, because you present the value in your own career development, and we think that that's a worthwhile investment. But somebody that expects that we're just going to read their minds and that stuff is just going to appear to them, this isn't the right environment, because taking the initiative is a really foundational level that we expect from our employees.
At every level, right? Not just within this context, but the work-life fit part of it seems to be such a potentially stressful topic that it's important that be out there. And you've worked elsewhere, other places around. I mean, can you comment a little bit on, without telling us, obviously we don't want to sound too self-promotional here, but the flexibility piece, the mentoring part, the IT part, those are kind of the big pieces for us relative to what we see out there in some other firms anyway.
Oh, it definitely is, and I've said it, and I say it to everybody, that Fehr Peers is very unique in that we talk about work-life fit, but we don't just talk the talk, we actually walk the walk. A lot of companies say that they offer it, but when it comes down to it, not so much. It's around what's convenient for them. It's very different here, and we do ask a lot of our employees, but we do provide them many options. Michael hit on a few of them, but there's fit, and it depends on. It can depend on the week. It can depend on where you are in your life. It can depend on a deliverable that's due in a month. Whether your work is a little bit higher in your fit than your home life, but I think overall it balances, but it fits well.
I had a public agency client, executive director, asked me not long ago, what percentage of your employees are on an alternative work schedule? Because they had received a request for it from one of their staff, and they didn't have any flexibility. That's just, as an agency, it was very hard. She said, what percentage of your employees are on an alternative work schedule? And I said, what do you mean by alternative? And she said, something other than 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. And I said, 100, and including me and everybody. And it's not the same, frankly, for anybody, and it won't probably be the same for them 6 months from today, even either. And it was just, you just kind of struggle to get that, particularly in an agency environment. I think that's one of the challenges along the way. There's pros and cons all around, but that's one of those challenges. So, other questions?
Sure. So, kind of touching back quickly on entrepreneurial spirit, we had a follow-up question to define what entrepreneurial spirit means at Fehr Peers.
Okay. Define what entrepreneurial spirit means. Michael, do you want to take a shot at that? Or Anne, well, go ahead, Anne. Take a shot at that. What does that mean?
To me, it means somebody who's willing to take a risk. Stretch yourself a little bit, try something outside your comfort zone, and take that risk and try something new. Mm-hmm. That's what part of it means to me.
Do you see some risk aversion out there in the new hires, Megan, sometimes, and feel like we have to make it okay to make mistakes and okay to ask questions and give that permission?
Yeah, but I think that's an early hallmark of somebody who's going to be here for a long time versus somebody who's going to struggle, is the ones that we have to have that conversation with versus the ones that we're just seeing. I mean, I think what we want to see people who aren't just sitting around waiting for things to be brought to them, but that they're actively looking for it. And then people who are able to always be looking for opportunities. I had a phone call earlier with one of my colleagues who's going to be focusing on equity for the company this year. Kind of what does that mean for a new direction for us? And I was just like, this is going to, 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this moment and that you decided that this was going to be you and that you were going to figure out what this meant for Fehr Peers. But it's all entrepreneurial for her. She doesn't know what it is, but she knows that it's big and that it's important and that she has a leadership opportunity in it.
Yeah, no one knows what it is. That's the whole point. But we're going to move forward.
Raise her hand and she's on it.
Yeah, exactly. And she's a recent grad, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about a recent grad here. Exactly. Michael, anything you want to add on what entrepreneurial spirit, what about this idea of risk-taking?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's having the passion and the drive to challenge yourself, challenge us, but also follow through. So I think we can all get excited and put together great lists and great plans. So we're going to do all these amazing things, and then we just get a little busy. It doesn't happen. So part of being entrepreneurial is having the drive to see it through and give it the attention it needs to prove whether or not it works. And some of them will pan out more than others, but oftentimes the best of intentions go awry just from sheer lack of
Too busy. Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. All right, we've got,
So we have about 10
minutes.
minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do have a few more questions, and I know some other topics we were hoping to touch
Sure.
on too. One person asked, can you explain how the career ladder works at Fehr Peers, moving from entry level to mid-level and so on?
Okay. Yeah, we have a graphic actually that we don't have. We can't necessarily show it functionally here at this point. But Megan, you want to maybe just give people an overview of that? And it's not a ladder form.
And we actually just had a lunchtime session on this where we talked about how you jump on different pieces of it today. But usually you'll come in at engineer planner 1, and you'll go 1, 2, 3, and then it's senior 1, 2, 3, associate 1, 2, senior associate 1, 2, and principal is kind of the titles of it. But I think the hallmarks are really growing into your own consultant, right? So your first couple of years, you're a doer, you're being given your work. But right around engineer planner 3, all of a sudden you're kind of an independent contributor with some of your own clients, winning some of your own work. By the time you're getting into the senior level, you're in charge of winning enough work to keep somebody else busy. And then associate, it's 2 or 3 people, and principal, it's 5 or 6 people, in kind of a traditional project management, consulting, marketing type of a role. And then some will choose to be a little less on that side of it and more technically focused, and then others will choose, kind of like the 3 of us here, to also take on more of a business side of that. But typically it's either a technical marketing or business track that you'll go through that progression in, depending on kind of where your interests are, and sometimes all 3 of them are jumping around to them, depending on really what the company and the office needs from you.
And how the market is shifting around, which is certainly the case. Now, and Megan mentioned marketing a couple times. I think that's a topic that I would be willing to bet others have questions about. If I go into consulting, am I expected to do all this marketing? Do I have to shake hands and kiss babies and channel my inner used car salesman strategy to be marketing and get people to do things they don't want to do? Maybe even talk, especially early career. How does somebody early in their career market, if you will?
So early in your career is just doing a very good job. So you do good work, and it leads to repeat clients, and they know that you're steady and you're going to come through on the assignments that you've been given. So to me, that's really marketing when you first start out. And even as you progress, it's not always the kissing babies and cold calling. It can be anything from just being a trusted advisor to people and looking for opportunities to help them, and understanding if you can't help them, maybe there's somebody else even outside of Fehr Peers that you could steer them towards. So there's all kinds of marketing, and I think people sometimes think it's the picking up the phone and do you have work for me? It's not.
500 calls. Right? Do you have any transportation work? No.
Right.
Not that way. It's not that way. Okay. Others. 5 minutes.
I think we're good on the question.
Good.
We can kind of go back to some of the topics.
Yes. We definitely were thinking about, perhaps it'd be useful to talk a little bit about the internship process. There's a rumor, Michael, that we make people actually make presentations in front of our staff as a part of the interview process. Is that true? Do we actually do that?
It is true, and perhaps Anne or Megan could touch on what they do. So maybe I'm just a little less harsh or whatever, but we do it a little bit more informally in Los Angeles, and we expect people to come in and present on a project to 2 or 3 of us, not necessarily formally, throw up the PowerPoint and all that, but we want to hear about your work, and we want you to present and demonstrate your ability to speak in front of others.
Right. Do we have to do it in front of the whole office, Megan, in Walnut Creek?
Not for interns. We do for full-time. For the interns, you usually come in and spend about a half hour or 45 minutes with a couple groups of people. Sometimes some of that will be over a coffee meeting, and depending on if we know you elsewhere, lots of us teach classes or are otherwise involved in professional societies. So sometimes we'll have already interviewed you some ways through that for an internship, and then it will just be meeting some of our colleagues. But certainly for full-time, it's 3 one-hour interviews with a couple of people and a lunchtime presentation in front of the whole office.
In front of the whole office. Okay, get ready. And are we doing that in Denver as well?
Same thing.
Same thing. Same thing. Okay. Cassandra, what else? We've got just a couple minutes left here. Is there some other topics that you feel like?
Have you touched on guidance versus autonomy?
Yeah, that a little bit, but I do think that probably is a good one to touch on here. The importance of balancing how much guidance should I expect walking in the door relative to how much am I expected to just sort of go and do and take risks and learn from. And so, Megan, you and I worked on this chart a couple years ago that was helpful to try to convey to our new staff. We can't show it here today, but maybe you can describe that a little bit for everybody.
Yeah, I think early on, and I've been onboarding a couple of staff the past couple of weeks, and so guidance is very important early on, both to make sure that you're successful and feel supported, but also to make sure that we're being efficient, right? And so, like, some things I've been telling these new staff is, if you find that you're Googling something, or if you find that, like, you're just brute forcing your way through something, pause and ask, because chances are we've written a script that automates that, or that the person sitting next to you is a better resource than Google is on this topic. And so we want you to be very heavy on the guidance and direction that you're getting. But a couple years in, that starts to shift, and certainly one of the reviews I was involved in yesterday is for one of my colleagues who's at about the 7-8 year mark. She's actually getting ready to manage our Oakland office in a couple of months. And we talked about now the way that we're going to be reviewing her performance is how she's developing others. That's, most of her action plan is going to be the feedback that we're getting on how others are growing and developing. And so not only has she gone through kind of a, being autonomous independently stage, but now she's going through making sure, she's being judged by how she brings others along.
Right, and we're not expecting that she'll need less guidance per se in total, but we're expecting she'll need less guidance on the stuff that she's pretty much already learned, right? She's moving into a managerial role. She's going to need more guidance in that area. But some of the same, we struggle sometimes. We had some of these cases in the past where people were needing guidance on the same things. We felt like over and over again, and maybe we're wondering whether that was a good fit or whether that was quite sinking in a way that was of value. So anything, Anne or Michael, that you wanted to add to that point?
No, I think Megan hit it well.
We got it covered. Okay. And let's see, we talk a little bit about our sharing of our work across offices real quick. And I know we do a fair bit of that in Denver and all the offices really, but maybe talk briefly how that works. And I think maybe that's about the last question we have time for here. But that might be a good topic. You may sit in Denver, but working on projects around the country, really.
Right, and I think that's we have the technology set up where it's very easy to do that. So right now in Denver, we have people working on projects in Utah, San Jose, Seattle, across the company. And there isn't a day that goes by that somebody isn't talking, or everybody isn't talking to people in other offices. So it's very collaborative across borders, if you will.
And it goes through phases, right, Michael? I mean, we go through periods where there's a little more in LA and we need to bring in some help, and then we go through periods where there's maybe some availability with some staff, and there's opportunities to help in some other offices. You've seen that certainly over your time in LA.
Yeah, absolutely. And also on the technical side, there's some areas that are heavily investing in, say, active transportation now that weren't before, and so LA is that place, and 10 years ago LA was not that place.
That's right, exactly.
People in other offices that are highly skilled in that area are working down here, and vice versa. So we really try to balance workload as one goal, but also make sure that we're pairing together great technical leaders to serve our clients effectively and provide the best learning opportunities for our staff as well.
Very good. we're all set. We're out of time, and if we didn't get covered anybody's questions, we will circle back in the next week or so with an answer by email, right?
Definitely.
Or if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to shoot those to us as well.
Right. So we actually would ask that you email any additional questions that you have, or I know there may have been a couple that came through that were a little on different topics that we weren't able to cover today, a little outside our primary objective today. So feel free to email those directly to us at resumes@fehrandpeers.com through the end of this week. And any questions that we receive through Friday here or the next day or two, we'd be happy to respond to you within a week of this webinar to get those questions your way. On behalf of Matt, Ann, Michael, Megan, and all of Fehr Peers, we wish you the best in your career endeavors and really thank you for joining us today for Unfiltered Career Insights.
Thanks, everybody. Great job, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of
Bye-bye, everyone.